There's a particular kind of peace you find in routines. Wake at 6, coffee by 6:15. Watch the sun crawl over the cornfields while Linda hums in the kitchen. 42 years. And I could map our mornings like the lines on my palm. My name is Frank Dalton, 65 years old, Cedar Falls, Iowa, retired from the grain mill after 37 years. Linda worked at Midwest Insurance downtown. Same desk, same coffee mug, same route home for longer than most marriages last. We weren't the kind of couple that made grand gestures. No weekend getaways or surprise flowers. We were steady, reliable, the kind of love that doesn't shout, but stays. Or so I thought. It started small. Linda began staying late at the office. End of quarter reports, she'd say. Audit prep. Reasonable explanations. She'd worked insurance long enough to know the rhythm of busy seasons. I didn't question it. But then the late nights became a pattern. 3 times a week. Then 4. I'd sit in the living room. The TV on, but not really watching. Listening for her car in the driveway. She'd come in tired, distracted, kiss my cheek without looking at me, say she'd already eaten, head straight for the shower. The warmth we'd built over 4 decades started to feel like a photograph I was looking at instead of living in. I'm not a jealous man. Never have been. Age teaches you that suspicion without cause is just poison you drink yourself, but I'm not blind either. When you've known someone for 42 years, you notice shifts. The way she started keeping her phone face down on the table, how she'd glance at it during dinner, something she never did before, the sudden password on her laptop, small things, the kind you'd feel foolish bringing up. I'd lie awake some nights, listening to her breathe beside me, wondering if I was imagining it all. Maybe retirement had made me too observant, too much time to notice details that didn't matter. Linda had always been private about work. Professional, that was just her way. But there was something else now, a guardedness I couldn't name. One morning, I watched her get ready for work through the bedroom doorway. She spent longer on her makeup than usual, changed her blouse twice, checked herself in the mirror with an expression I hadn't seen in years, something between nerves and anticipation. She caught me watching and smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Big meeting today?" I asked. "Just another Tuesday," she said. But it wasn't. I could feel it. That evening, she called at 5:30. Another late night. Her voice had that rehearsed quality, like she'd practiced the sentence before dialing. I said it was fine, told her I'd keep dinner warm. Then I sat in my chair and stared at the cornfields turning gold in the sunset, wondering when routine stopped being comfortable and started being camouflage. Something had shifted. I just didn't know how much yet. The night that changed everything started like all the others. Linda called at 6. "Emergency audit," she said. "I'll be late. Don't wait up." Her voice carried that same practiced edge. I told her to drive safe, hung up, reheated the pot roast I'd made. She came home just after 10:30. I was reading in the living room when I heard her car. The engine cut. A long pause before the door opened. When she walked in, something was off. Her hair was different. Not messy exactly, but rearranged, like she'd run her fingers through it and tried to put it back the way it was. The careful way she'd styled it that morning was gone. "Long night?" I asked. "You have no idea." She kicked off her heels by the door. That's when I noticed them. Dust on the toes. Not the carpet dust from the office. Dirt dust. Like she'd walked across unpaved ground. Midwest Insurance had underground parking, sealed hallways. Linda's shoes never got dirty at work. "Want some dinner?" I asked. I grabbed something. She moved toward the hallway. "I'm going to shower." I watched her disappear into the bedroom, heard the bathroom door lock, water running. That's when I did something I'm not proud of. I walked outside to her car. The interior light came on when I opened the driver's door. Her work bag sat in the passenger seat, papers visible through the open top. I didn't touch anything, just looked. Then I checked something else, the odometer. We'd filled her tank 3 days ago at the station on Maple. I'd made a mental note of the mileage without meaning to, the kind of detail that sticks when you've got time to notice. 38,214 miles. Now it reads 38,000 361, 147 miles in 3 days. Her office was 4 miles from our house, 8 miles round trip. Even with errands and the long, wandering drives she sometimes took to clear her head, it felt high. Not impossible, just high, not 147. I stood there in the driveway, the dome light glowing, listening to the shower running inside the house. My chest felt tight. My hands are cold. Where had she been? I closed the car door. I walked back inside, sat in my chair like nothing had happened. Linda came out 20 minutes later in her robe, hair wet, skin flushed from the hot water. She poured herself a glass of wine, sat on the opposite end of the couch. "How was your day?" she asked. "Quiet," I said. We watched the news without speaking. When she finished her wine, she kissed my forehead and went to bed. I stayed up until midnight, staring at nothing, doing math in my head. 147 miles. Old age makes you careful, makes you question yourself, but it doesn't make you stupid. Something was wrong. I just didn't want to name it yet. The change in Linda became impossible to ignore. We'd spent 42 years in an easy rhythm, comfortable silence, small gestures that didn't need explaining. But now everything felt misaligned, like a door that doesn't quite close anymore. She started snapping at me. Little things that never mattered before suddenly mattered. I'd leave my coffee cup on the counter instead of the dishwasher. She'd sigh like I'd committed a crime. "Frank, how many times do I have to ask?" I'd been leaving coffee cups on that counter for 4 decades. I'd ask about her day. She'd give one-word answers. Fine, busy, tired. I'd mention something I'd seen on the news. She'd check her phone mid-sentence. One evening, I suggested we drive to Waterloo for dinner, a restaurant we used to like. She looked at me like I'd asked her to climb a mountain. "I'm exhausted, Frank. Can we just stay in?" But she wasn't too exhausted to spend an hour on her phone after dinner, texting someone with a faint smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. I didn't ask who it was. Age has taught me that accusations without proof are grenades you throw at your own feet. But I watched. I listened. I paid attention. Her phone became a third presence in our house. She carried it everywhere, set it face down on every surface, angled the screen away when notifications came in. Once, I walked into the kitchen while she was texting. She jumped like I'd caught her stealing, locked the screen, shoved the phone in her pocket. "Didn't hear you come in," she said. "I live here," I said, keeping my voice calm. She turned back to the dishes without answering. At night, she'd lie beside me, but feel 1,000 miles away. I'd reach for her hand sometimes, the way I had for 42 years. She'd let me hold it for a moment, then pull away, citing cramps or needing to adjust the blanket. The warmth was gone, replaced by something careful and distant. I wanted to ask her outright, to sit her down and say, "Linda, what's happening to us?" But I'm old enough to know that some questions crack foundations, some conversations you can't take back. So I stayed quiet, watched her move through our home like a guest instead of a partner, noticed how she'd start sentences and stop halfway through, like she was editing herself in real time. One night she came home late again, stood in the doorway of the living room, car keys still in her hand. "I'm thinking about taking a weekend trip," she said. "Just me. I need to clear my head." "From what?" I asked. She hesitated, looked at me like she was trying to decide how much truth to give. "From everything," she said. Then she went to bed. I sat alone in the dark, feeling the cold draft of distance settle between us, wondering how long it had been there without me naming it. Ron Mitchell lived 2 houses down, retired mechanic, good man. We'd wave to each other in the mornings, talk Hawkeyes football when our paths crossed. He caught me outside one Saturday while I was trimming the hedges. "Hey, Frank," he called, walking over with his dog. "Saw Linda the other night. Didn't know she liked that new cafe over on Harrison Street." I stopped clipping, kept my face neutral. "Harrison Street?" "Yeah, that French place. Bistro something. My daughter took us there last week. Fancy spot. Linda was sitting by the window. It looked like she was having a good time." He said it casually, just making conversation. No suspicion in his voice. I smiled. "Must have been a work thing." "Could be," Ron said. though it was pretty late for work. 9:30, maybe 10. He moved on, kept walking his dog, left me standing there with hedge clippers in my hand and a stone in my chest. Harrison Street was across town, 20 minutes from our house in the opposite direction of her office, and Linda had never mentioned any cafe, any dinner, any meeting. That night at dinner, I tested the water. Ron mentioned he saw you at a cafe the other night. She didn't look up from her plate. When? Didn't say exactly. This week sometime. Must have been someone else, she said. I haven't been to any cafe. She said it without hesitation, without a flicker of uncertainty. A clean, immediate lie. I nodded, took another bite of chicken, let the silence stretch. She glanced at me once, quickly, then back to her food. I didn't push, didn't argue. Experience teaches you that liars need room to breathe. They'll hang themselves if you give them enough rope. But inside, something shifted. For weeks, I'd been questioning myself, wondering if I was imagining things, if retirement had made me paranoid, if the mileage, the late nights, the distance were all just coincidence. Ron's comment wasn't proof, but it was confirmation. My instincts weren't wrong. That night, Linda went to bed early, said she had a headache. I stayed up, sitting in the dark living room, thinking about 42 years of marriage, about trust built brick by brick over decades, about how fragile that trust becomes when someone starts rearranging the truth. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. Confrontation without evidence is just desperation. And I wasn't desperate. I was methodical. So I decided to do what I'd always done. Watch. Listen. Gather the pieces. The truth has a way of finding you, even when you're not looking for it. Sometimes it comes through a neighbor's small talk. Sometimes it comes through mileage that doesn't add up. Either way, it comes, and I was ready to meet it. Linda left her lunch on the counter Tuesday morning. I found it sitting by the coffee maker after she'd already gone. A plastic container with last night's pasta, her name written on a piece of masking tape in her neat handwriting. For 42 years, she'd never forgotten her lunch. I stood there looking at it, debating. We weren't in a good place, hadn't been for weeks, but some habits run deeper than distance. So I grabbed my keys and drove the 12 minutes to Midwest Insurance. The parking lot was half empty when I pulled in. I'd only been to Linda's office a handful of times over the years. She liked keeping work and home separate. Professional boundaries, she'd call it. I walked through the glass doors carrying the container. The receptionist looked up. Help you? Just bringing my wife her lunch. Linda Dalton. The woman's face shifted slightly. Oh, Linda's not in today. I paused. She left for work this morning. Maybe she's running errands? The receptionist offered a polite smile. She's been out quite a bit lately. Something in her tone felt careful, like she was choosing words. I thanked her and walked back to my truck, sat behind the wheel with the container still in my hand, my mind turning. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Denise Walker. Denise had worked alongside Linda for over a decade. They'd carpooled sometimes, exchanged Christmas cards. If anyone knew where Linda was, Denise would. She picked up on the third ring. Frank, is everything okay? I'm fine. Listen, I brought Linda's lunch to the office, but they said she's not in. You know where she might be? Silence. Then, is she still keeping herself busy? The question landed strangely. What do you mean? Another pause. Longer this time. Frank, I thought you knew. My chest tightened. Knew what? Denise exhaled slowly. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet, almost apologetic. Linda quit. 2 months ago. The words hung in the air like smoke I couldn't wave away. She what? She gave her notice in September. Said she wanted to enjoy retirement. I assumed. Frank, I thought you knew. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed. The parking lot around me blurred at the edges. Frank, I'm here. I'm so sorry, I thought. It's not your fault, Denise. I heard her breathing on the other end, unsure what to say, what to do with the silence she just created. Thank you, I managed. I appreciate you telling me. I hung up before she could respond. 2 months. Linda had been lying to me for 2 months. Every late night, every emergency audit, every conversation about work stress and busy seasons, all of it. Lies. I sat in that truck for 20 minutes, staring at the building where my wife no longer worked, holding a lunch container with her name on it, trying to understand how 42 years of marriage had led to this moment. Some sentences split your life into before and after. That was mine. I drove home on autopilot, hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, mind somewhere else entirely. 2 months. I kept repeating it like a prayer I couldn't finish. 2 months of coming home to me, kissing my cheek, talking about her day at an office she no longer worked at, creating a life that didn't exist. Why? The question burned in my chest, but no answers came. I pulled into the driveway, sat with the engine off. The house looked the same as it had that morning. Same shutters, same hedges, same mailbox with our name on it. But nothing felt the same. I walked inside, set her lunch on the counter where she'd left it. I stood in the kitchen we'd remodeled 15 years ago, where we'd shared 10,000 meals, and felt like a stranger. My hands were shaking. I made coffee I didn't want, poured it down the sink, sat at the table, and tried to think clearly. 42 years. We'd built a life together, raised 2 kids, buried both our parents, survived job losses and health scares and all the small erosions that test a marriage. And through it all, I'd trusted her, not because I was naive, because she'd earned it. Every single day for 4 decades she'd earned it. Until now. The late nights made sense suddenly. The distance, the guarded phone, the lie to Ron about the cafe. She wasn't working. So where was she going? I felt the thought forming before I wanted to name it. The shape of it. The weight. Another man. My chest tightened. I stood up, paced the kitchen. I tried to push the thought away, but it wouldn't leave. Everything pointed there. The effort she'd started putting into her appearance. The secrecy. The mileage that didn't add up, the dust on her shoes, a man who picked her up from work, Denise might say, if I asked. But I didn't want to ask. I didn't want confirmation of something I wasn't ready to face. Maybe there was another explanation. Maybe she'd taken a second job she was embarrassed about. Maybe she was planning something, a surprise, something that required secrecy but wasn't betrayal. I wanted to believe that. But experience teaches you to trust patterns over wishes, and the pattern here was deception. I thought about confronting her. Imagine her walking through the door tonight, pretending to be tired from work, and me asking her flat out, "Where do you really go, Linda?" But I didn't want to do that. Not yet. 42 years had taught me patience, restraint, the value of knowing the full picture before you tear it down. So I decided to wait, to watch, to gather the pieces until I understood what I was really looking at. Betrayal doesn't shout, it whispers, and I was finally ready to listen. I spent the afternoon retracing memory like a man searching for something he'd lost, sat in my chair, stared at the cornfields, let the past few months unspool in my mind. The receipts. I remembered finding one in her coat pocket a few weeks back. I'd been hanging it in the closet and felt the paper crinkle. Pulled it out without thinking. Dinner for 2 at a steakhouse in Waterloo. $43. She'd told me she'd grabbed a sandwich at her desk that night. I'd put the receipt back, told myself it was a work lunch, a meeting, something innocent. Now it feels different. The frustration. She'd snapped at me more in the past 2 months than in the previous 2 years. Small things, irrational things, like she was angry at me for something I didn't understand. I thought it was stressful. Hormones, age, but maybe it was guilt. Maybe lying to someone you've loved for 42 years takes a toll. Maybe the frustration wasn't with me, it was with herself. The phone calls. She'd started stepping outside to take them. Work, she'd say, even on Saturdays, even on Sundays. I'd hear her voice, through the window, quieter than usual, almost tender. I'd thought nothing of it. Now I thought of everything. The grooming. She'd always taken care of herself, but recently, it was different. More effort, new perfume, clothes I didn't recognize, hair appointments every 3 weeks instead of every 6. I'd been flattered at first. I thought maybe she was feeling good, feeling confident. Now I wondered who she was trying to look good for. I sat there assembling the pieces like a puzzle I didn't want to finish. Each memory clicked into place with painful clarity. The way she'd stopped asking about my day, the way she'd started sleeping on the far edge of the bed, the way she'd look at me sometimes with an expression I couldn't read, Something between pity and guilt. I'd been living in memories while she'd been living in lies. 42 years, and I'd convinced myself nothing could break us, that we were solid, unshakable, but concrete cracks when the foundation shifts, and I'd been too comfortable to notice the ground moving beneath us. I thought about infidelity. The word itself felt foreign, something that happened to other people, younger people, people who didn't have history. But maybe history didn't protect you. Maybe it just gave you more to lose. I still didn't want to believe it. Part of me, the part that remembered our wedding day, our first house, the night our daughter was born, refused to accept that Linda could do this. But another part, the part shaped by 65 years of living, knew better. People change, marriages falter. Even the strongest foundations can crack if you stop paying attention. And I'd stopped paying attention. When the past starts making sense, it rarely brings comfort. I sat in that chair until the sun set, watching my marriage reshape itself in my mind, wondering how long I'd been living with a stranger. My phone rang just after 7, Denise's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear more, but I picked it up anyway. "Frank, I'm so sorry to bother you again." Her voice carried weight. The kind that comes before difficult truths. "It's fine, Denise. What is it?" She hesitated. "I've been thinking about our conversation, and I feel terrible. I assumed you knew Linda had quit, and now I'm worried I've made things worse." "You didn't make anything worse," I said. "You told me the truth. That's never wrong." Still, she paused. "There's something else. I wasn't sure if I should mention it, but it doesn't feel right keeping it from you." My chest tightened. "Go ahead." For a few months before Linda quit, she'd been leaving early, 2-3 times a week. Said she had appointments, errands. We all just figured it was personal stuff. I stayed quiet. Let her continue. A couple times I saw her getting picked up. There was a man, drove a dark blue sedan. I thought maybe he was family, a cousin or something. She never introduced him. The air felt thin suddenly. "What did he look like?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "I only saw him from a distance. Older, maybe your age, well-dressed. That's all I could really tell. Older, well-dressed, picking up my wife from work." "Did Linda ever mention him?" I asked. "No, and I didn't ask. It wasn't my business." She paused again. "Frank, I don't know what's going on, but I thought you should know. I'm sorry if I'm overstepping." "You're not," I said. "I appreciate you telling me. If there's anything I can do, there's not. But thank you, Denise. Really." We said goodbye. I set the phone down on the arm of my chair and stared at the blank TV screen. A man, not family, not a coworker she'd mentioned, not someone from our lives, a stranger who picked her up, who knew her schedule, who she left work early for. I felt everything inside me compress into something hard and cold. For weeks I'd been questioning myself, wondering if I was imagining things, if age had made me paranoid. But I wasn't imagining anything. Linda had quit her job 2 months ago without telling me. She'd been lying about where she spent her days. And there was a man, someone she'd kept hidden, someone who mattered enough to rearrange her life around. I sat in the growing darkness of the living room, listening to the house settle, feeling the weight of what I now knew pressing down on my chest. I still didn't have all the pieces, but I had enough to understand that my marriage wasn't what I thought it was, enough to know I couldn't keep pretending. Sometimes the truth arrives gently, carefully, through the voice of a kind woman who didn't want to hurt you, but it cuts just the same. Wednesday evening, Linda announced another late night. "Busy week," she said, already moving toward the bedroom to change. "Don't wait up." I nodded, keep my expression neutral, told her to drive safe. But this time, when her taillights disappeared down our street, I grabbed my keys. My truck was older, common, nothing that would stand out. I kept 3 car lengths back, let another vehicle slip between us when I could. 40 years of driving these roads gave me an advantage. I knew the shortcuts, the rhythms, the patterns. She didn't take the route to her old office, didn't head downtown at all. Instead, she drove west, past the mall, past the new subdivision, out toward the community center near Riverbend Park. She pulled into the parking lot. I drove past, turned into a church lot across the street, killed my lights. Through the windshield, I watched her sit in her car for a full minute, saw her check her phone, adjust her hair in the rearview mirror. Then a dark blue sedan pulled in beside her. My chest tightened. A man got out, older, gray hair, wore slacks and a button-down shirt. He walked around to her door, opened it for her. Linda stepped out. They didn't embrace, didn't touch, just exchanged words I couldn't hear. Then she got into his car. The sedan pulled out of the lot. I waited 5 seconds and followed. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than they needed to. My breath came shallow. This wasn't anger yet. It was something colder, something closer to fear. Fear of confirmation, fear of what came after knowing. They drove for 10 minutes. Residential streets, modest homes with chain-link fences and basketball hoops in driveways. The sedan turned into a driveway on Sycamore Lane. I drove past, parked 2 houses down on the opposite side, engine off. Through my side mirror, I watched them get out. The man said something. Linda nodded. They walked to the front door together. He unlocked it. They went inside. The door closed behind them. I sat there in the dark, my truck cooling, the dashboard clock glowing green. 7:43 p.m., 42 years of marriage, and my wife had just walked into another man's house. I thought I'd feel rage, betrayal, the kind of heat that makes men do stupid things, but I didn't. I felt hollow, like something vital had been carved out of me, and I was only now noticing the absence. I waited. I watched the windows. Lights came on in what looked like a living room. Shadows moved behind curtains, but I couldn't make out details. Part of me wanted to walk up to that door, knock, demand answers, but I didn't, because I'd lived long enough to know that some truths need space to reveal themselves fully. So I sat in my truck and waited, feeling my marriage reshape itself into something I no longer recognized. It's strange. The moment you realize your marriage isn't where you thought you left it. I gave them 20 minutes before I moved, got out of my truck. I walked casually down the sidewalk like I belonged there, just a man taking an evening stroll. The mailbox at the curb had a name on it, hand-painted letters, fading but legible. R. Hale. I pulled out my phone, opened the browser, searched for the name with the address. Robert Hale, 71 years old, widower. His wife passed away 3 years ago according to an obituary I found. Cancer. Longtime resident of Cedar Falls. Retired postal worker. Not the profile of a man having an affair. I kept scrolling, found a Facebook page, barely used. A few photos of fishing trips. Grandchildren. Nothing that explained why my wife was sitting in his living room on a Wednesday night. I walked back to my truck, climbed in. I watched the house. The man, Robert, didn't look like someone sneaking around, didn't carry himself that way. Everything about him seemed ordinary, tired even. And Linda, through the front window, past the half-drawn curtains, I could see them sitting at a table, not close, not intimate, across from each other, like a meeting. Linda's posture was stiff. Her hands moved when she talked, gesturing in that way she did when she was trying to explain something important. Robert listened, nodded occasionally, wrote something down on a notepad. This didn't look like romance. It looked like business. But what business would my wife have with a 71-year-old widower she'd never mentioned? I thought about the lies, the mileage, the dust on her shoes, the receipts. All of it had pointed me toward infidelity. But watching them now, I wasn't sure. Linda looked nervous, almost afraid. She kept glancing at the door like she expected someone else to walk in. Robert stood. I walked to a filing cabinet in the corner, pulled out papers, brought them back to the table. They talked for another 10 minutes. Then Linda stood abruptly, said something sharp. Robert raised his hands, palms out, like he was trying to calm her down. She turned toward the window. For a moment, I thought she'd seen me. My hand went to the ignition, ready to leave, but she was just staring out at nothing. Her expression was raw, hurt. Robert touched her shoulder. She pulled away, wiped her eyes. Then she walked toward the door. I slid lower in my seat as she emerged from the house. She moved quickly to the sedan, got in. Robert came out behind her, said something through the window. She didn't respond, just started the car. He watched her pull away, standing in the driveway with his hands in his pockets, looking more sad than guilty. I waited until both cars were gone before I started my engine. Drove home in silence, my mind racing. This wasn't an affair, but it was something. And whatever it was, it had my wife crying in a stranger's house. Not every secret is romantic. Some are heavier. I followed her again Friday night. Same routine, same lie, same dark blue sedan in the community center parking lot. This time, I parked closer, across the street behind a delivery van that gave me a clearer view. Robert arrived first. Linda pulled in 3 minutes later. They exchanged words. She got into his car. They drove to the house on Sycamore Lane. I followed, parked in the same spot 2 houses down, settled in to wait. The evening stretched. Light faded. Street lamps flickered on. I watched the windows, looking for anything that would explain this. An hour passed, then another. At 9:47, the front door opened. Linda stepped out first. She was holding something, a manila envelope, thick, the kind that holds documents, legal papers, something official. She clutched it against her chest with both hands like it might blow away. Robert stood in the doorway, said something. Linda shook her head. Her body language was tight, defensive. She walked to her car without looking back. I could see her face under the streetlight, eyes red, makeup smudged. She'd been crying. She got into her car, sat there for a full minute, staring at the envelope in her lap. Then she lifted it, pressed it to her forehead, and closed her eyes. I felt something crack inside me. This wasn't guilt, wasn't the face of someone sneaking around for pleasure. This was a pain. She finally started the car, pulled out of the driveway. I let her get a block ahead before I followed. She drove straight home. I took a longer route, came in from the other direction, parked in the driveway 2 minutes after she did. When I walked inside, she was in the bedroom. The door was closed. I heard water running in the bathroom. I stood in the hallway for a moment, staring at that closed door, wondering what was on the other side of it. What truth was hiding in that envelope? What weight she was carrying alone? Part of me wanted to knock, to ask, to end this dance of lies and surveillance and just face whatever was happening between us. But I couldn't, not yet, because once I asked, once I confronted her, there would be no going back. The question would shatter whatever remained of our illusion of normalcy, and I wasn't ready for that. So I walked to the kitchen, made tea I didn't drink, sat at the table and stared at nothing. 20 minutes later, Linda emerged, eyes dry, face composed. She'd fixed her makeup, changed into pajamas. "You're up late," she said. "Couldn't sleep." She nodded, poured herself with water, stood by the sink, her back to me. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine," she said. "Just tired." She finished her water, set the glass in the sink, kissed the top of my head as she passed. "Good night, Frank." I listened to her footsteps fade down the hall. I heard the bedroom door close. An envelope shouldn't scare a grown man, but this one did. Over the next week, I followed her 3 more times. Every trip was the same. Same parking lot, same sedan, same house on Sycamore Lane. Every visit ended the same way. Linda leaves emotional, drained, holding that envelope or variations of it. Sometimes papers, sometimes folders, and every night she came home, she pretended nothing was wrong. I stopped trying to guess, started documenting instead. I kept a small notebook in my truck, wrote down times, dates, routes, the length of each visit, the condition she was in when she left. Patterns emerged. Tuesday and Friday nights, like clockwork. Occasionally a Thursday, never weekends. She'd spend between 90 minutes and 2 hours inside that house. Always left visibly upset. Always drove straight home afterward. Robert never looked guilty, never looked like a man hiding an affair. He looked concerned, worn down, like whatever business they were conducting was taking a toll on both of them. I started considering possibilities beyond infidelity. Debt. Maybe Linda had gotten into financial trouble. Gambling. Credit cards. Something she was ashamed to tell me about. Maybe Robert was helping her. Some kind of financial advisor or counselor. But that didn't explain the tears, the fear in her eyes. Medical issues. Maybe she was sick. Maybe Robert was a doctor or specialist. Maybe she was hiding a diagnosis because she didn't want to worry me. But doctors don't work out of their homes at night, and medical discussions don't usually involve manila envelopes and crying. Family secrets. Maybe someone from Linda's past had surfaced. A child she'd given up before we met. A sibling I didn't know about. Something that required legal documents and painful conversations. But Linda had told me everything about her family. At least I thought she had. Blackmail crossed my mind. Someone holding something over her. Forcing payments. Forcing meetings. But Robert didn't look like a blackmailer. And Linda didn't look scared of him. She looked scared of the situation. Every theory had holes. Every explanation fell short. What I knew for certain, Linda had quit her job 2 months ago without telling me. She was meeting a 71-year-old widower twice a week. She was receiving documents that made her cry, and she was lying to me about all of it. That much was fact. The why remained buried. I thought about confronting her 100 times. Practiced the words in my head while I sat in my truck outside that house. Linda, where have you really been going? But something held me back. Maybe it was fear. Fear that asking would make it real. Fear that whatever she told me would be worse than what I imagined. Or maybe it was something else. A quiet instinct that said I needed the full picture before I acted. That rushing in now would only shatter what little trust remained. So I kept watching. I kept following. Kept waiting for the moment when everything would finally make sense. The truth isn't always betrayal. Sometimes it's a burden, and I needed to know which one I was facing. Tuesday night, I didn't follow from a distance. I drove straight to Sycamore Lane, parked in Robert's driveway behind the dark blue sedan. Linda's car was already there. I could see her silhouette through the living room window. My heart was hammered, not from anger, from the weight of what I was about to do. I walked to the front door. I stood there for a moment, my hand raised to knock, wondering if this was the right choice. Then I knocked anyway. Footsteps inside. The door opened. Robert stood there, his face shifting from confusion to recognition to something close to resignation. "You're Frank," he said quietly. "I am." He glanced back into the house. I heard Linda's voice from inside. "Who is it?" Robert looked at me, a question in his eyes. "She doesn't know I'm here," I said, "but I think it's time we talked." He nodded slowly, stepped aside. I walked into the living room. Linda was sitting at the table, papers spread in front of her. When she saw me, the color drained from her face. "Frank, I know you quit your job," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I know you've been coming here for weeks. I know you've been lying to me." She stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. Her hands shook. "I can explain." "Then explain." She looked at Robert. He gave her a small nod. "Please sit," she said, her voice breaking. "Both of you." I expected a fight, expected anger or defensiveness or more lies. What I got was something else entirely. Linda sank back into her chair, put her face in her hands, and started to cry. Not the quiet tears I'd seen through windows. Real crying. The kind that comes from a place too deep to hide anymore. Robert sat down across from her, looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite name. Sorrow, sympathy, understanding. "Mr. Dalton," he said softly, "your wife isn't having an affair." The words hung there. "Then what is this?" I asked. Robert glanced at Linda. She was still crying, unable to speak. "I'm a retired family counselor," Robert said. "I've been helping Linda navigate something from her past, something she's been carrying for a very long time." I looked at my wife, at the woman I'd known for 42 years. The papers spread across the table, not financial documents or medical records, letters, handwritten letters, dozens of them. "Linda," I said quietly. She lifted her head, looked at me with eyes full of pain I'd never seen before. "I have a son," she whispered. The room tilted. "What?" "Before I met you," she said, her voice shaking. "I had a son, and I gave him up." I sat frozen, trying to process the words. Robert leaned forward. "She didn't know how to tell you, so she came to me for help." I expected a fight. What I got was a confession. Linda couldn't look at me. She stared at the table, at the letters scattered there, while Robert filled the silence. "I worked in adoption services for 30 years before I retired," he said. Linda found me through a support group for birth mothers. She reached out 6 months ago. 6 months. Half a year of carrying this alone. Why? I asked, looking at Linda. Why didn't you tell me? Her voice was barely audible. Because I was ashamed. Of what? Of everything. She finally met my eyes. I was 17, Frank. Pregnant. Scared. My parents sent me away. Said I was ruining my life. Ruining theirs. They made me give him up. Her hands trembled on the table. I held him for 10 minutes after he was born. They said it would be easier if I didn't see him, but I couldn't leave without holding him once. Tears ran down her face. They took him away, told me to forget, to move on, to never speak of it again. I felt something crack in my chest. And I tried, she continued. I went to college, meet you, built a life, Sarah and Michael. I told myself I'd done the right thing, that he was better off, that I'd moved on. But you hadn't, I said quietly. She shook her head. I thought about him every single day. I wondered what he looked like, if he was happy, if he ever thought about me. Robert picked up one of the letters. Hold it carefully. 4 months ago, he found her, he said. His name is David. He's 43, married, 2 kids. He hired a service to locate his birth mother. Linda covered her mouth with her hand. He sent me a letter, she whispered, through the agency. Said he wasn't angry, just wanted to know where he came from. I wanted to understand. And you came to Robert, I said. She nodded. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. I quit my job because I couldn't focus, couldn't pretend everything was normal. I needed help figuring out how to respond, whether to respond. Robert set the letter down gently. We've been working through it together, reading his letters, helping Linda process 43 years of grief she'd never allowed herself to feel. I looked at the papers, saw handwriting that wasn't Linda's, saw photographs mixed in with the letters. A man, dark hair, Linda's eyes. The envelopes, I said. His letters, Linda confirmed. He's been writing every few weeks, telling me about his life, his adoptive parents, his childhood. He's not asking for anything, Frank. He just wants to know me. The room was silent, except for the sound of Linda's crying. This whole time, I said slowly, I thought, I know what you thought, she said, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The truth wasn't about betrayal. It was about a lifetime of regret. Linda wiped her eyes with the tissue Robert handed her. I was going to tell you, she said. I swear I was. I just needed to understand it first myself. 42 years, I said. You've been married to me for 42 years, and you never mentioned this. I couldn't. Why not? Her voice broke again. Because I didn't want you to see me differently. Linda, I was 17 and pregnant out of wedlock in 1982, Frank. My parents were strict church people, the kind who thought shame was a mortal sin, worse than the act itself. They sent me to live with my aunt in Nebraska for the last 5 months, so no one back home would know. I had the baby in a small hospital there, signed the papers, and came home like nothing had happened. She turned to face me. When I met you 2 years later, I thought about telling you, but we were so happy, so new. I told myself it didn't matter, that it was the past, that bringing it up would only hurt us both. So you buried it, I said. I had to, she said quietly, because if I let myself think about him, I'd fall apart, and I couldn't fall apart. I had a life to build, children to raise, a marriage to protect. Robert spoke gently. It's a common pattern. Birth mothers from that era were told to forget, to move forward. They weren't given space to grieve. Linda sat back down, looked at me with exhaustion in every line of her face. When David's letter came, it broke everything open. All the grief I'd locked away for 4 decades came flooding back. And you thought I wouldn't understand, I said. I thought you'd be angry, that I'd kept something so big from you for so long, that you'd wonder what else I'd lied about. Did you lie about anything else? No. She reached across the table toward me, stopped halfway. Frank, you and our children are my whole life. This wasn't about hiding something from you. It was about protecting what we built. From what? From my past, from my shame, from the fear that if you knew I'd given away a child, you'd think I was capable of giving away anything. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I didn't want you to look at me and see a woman who abandoned her son. I sat with that, Let it settle. Thought about Linda at 17, alone, scared, forced to make an impossible choice. Thought about her carrying that weight for 43 years, building a life on top of buried grief. You should have told me, I said finally. I know. I would have understood. Would you? She asked. Or would there always have been a part of you that wondered? I didn't have an answer. Sometimes the secrets our wives keep aren't to hurt us. They're to protect the life we built. Robert stood and walked to the filing cabinet. There's something else you should see. He pulled out a folder, set it on the table in front of me. Open it carefully. Inside was a photograph, professional quality. Recently, a man stood in front of a house, dark hair graying at the temples, strong jaw, smile that looked familiar. Linda's eyes. That's David, Robert said quietly. He included it in his third letter. I picked up the photo, studied it, tried to match the face to the infant Linda had described, tried to imagine 43 years compressed into this single image. He looked happy, healthy, whole. He's a teacher, Linda said softly. High school English, lives in Wisconsin with his wife Emily. They have 2 daughters, 12 and 9. Her voice carried a mixture of pride and pain. He says his adoptive parents were good to him, that he had a happy childhood, that he's not looking to replace them. He just wanted to fill in the missing pieces. I set the photo down. I looked at my wife. Relief washed through me. She hadn't been unfaithful, hadn't betrayed our marriage in the way I'd feared. But beneath the relief was something else. Hurt, not because of what she'd done at 17, but because of what she'd hidden at 68. You didn't trust me with this, I said. Frank, for weeks, Linda, months, you let me watch you pull away. Let me wonder what I'd done wrong. Let me think. I stopped, swallowed hard. You let me think you were leaving me. Tears filled her eyes again. I never meant. I know what you meant, I said, but that doesn't change what it felt like. The room fell silent. Robert cleared his throat gently. I'll give you 2 some privacy. He stood, moved toward the kitchen, left us alone at the table. Linda reached for my hand. This time I let her take it. I was scared, she whispered. Scared of losing you. Scared of David. Scared of everything this meant. What does it mean? I asked. I don't know yet, she said. He wants to meet me. In person. He's asked 3 times now. And? I don't know if I can do it. Her fingers tightened around mine. I don't know if I'm strong enough to face him after all these years. I looked at the photograph again, at the man my wife had carried for 9 months and held for 10 minutes, at the life she'd created and released and mourned in silence. You're strong enough, I said quietly. She looked at me with something close to hope. You think so? You've carried this for 43 years, I said. That takes strength most people don't have. It wasn't another man I was competing with. It was her past, and maybe finally, it was time to make peace with it. I left Robert's house before Linda did, drove home. I walked inside, sat at the kitchen table in the dark. My mind was still processing. A son, 43 years of silence, letters, meetings with a counselor, all of it hidden beneath a layer of lies I'd almost mistaken for betrayal. Relief and hurt twisted together in my chest until I couldn't tell which was which. The clock on the wall ticked past 11. Headlights swept across the kitchen window. Her car in the driveway. Engine cutting off. A long pause before the door opened. Linda walked in. Stopped when she saw me sitting there. Frank, you scared me. Couldn't sleep, I said. She set her purse on the counter. Moved carefully, like the air between us might break if she wasn't gentle. How was work? I asked. The question hung there. She turned to face me. Exhausted, eyes red from crying, hair slightly disheveled, and for just a moment, I thought she might tell me the truth. Busy, she said quietly. The usual. Something inside me cracked. Not anger. Something deeper. Something that felt like the foundation shifting beneath 42 years of trust. She'd just left Robert's house, left me sitting at that table, knew I'd confronted her secret head on, and still, she lied. Linda, I said, keeping my voice even, I need you to be honest with me. Her face changed, guard going up. I am being honest. Are you? She looked away. I'm tired, Frank. Can we do this tomorrow? Do what tomorrow? Whatever this is. She gestured vaguely. Whatever's been bothering you. I stood up slowly. I walked to the window, looked out at the street where I'd spent the last 2 weeks following my own wife. I know you quit your job, I said, my back still to her. I know about Robert. I know about the letters. Silence. When I turned around, she was frozen, hand on the counter, face pale. Frank, I know about your son. Her legs seemed to give out. She sank into a chair, put her head in her hands. How long have you known? She whispered. Does it matter? Yes. A few weeks, I said. About the job. Tonight, about the rest. She looked up at me. Tears streamed down her face. I was going to tell you. When? Soon. I just needed to. To what, Linda? To figure out how to keep lying to me? That's not fair. None of this is fair, I said, my voice rising slightly before I caught myself, brought it back down. You let me think you were having an affair. You let me follow you. You let me sit here night after night, wondering what I'd done to lose you. I never wanted that, she sobbed. But you chose it, I said quietly. Every time you lied about where you were going, every time you looked me in the eye and said you were working late, a small lie can break a big marriage, and ours was breaking. Linda cried into her hands, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. I'd seen her cry before, when her mother passed, when our daughter moved across the country, when our son got divorced. But this was different. This was grief breaking loose after decades of containment. I sat down across from her, waited. Eventually, the sobs quieted. She lifted her head, looked at me with red, swollen eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know. I never meant to hurt you. I know that too. She wiped her face with her sleeve, took a shaking breath. When David's letter came, I didn't know what to do. I stared at it for 3 days before I could open it. And when I finally did, her voice broke. Frank, I fell apart. Everything I'd buried for 43 years came flooding back. I stayed quiet. Let her talk. I was 17, pregnant. My parents were so ashamed. They sent me away like I was something to hide, something dirty. Linda, I held him once, she continued, the words tumbling out now. For 10 minutes. That's all they gave me. Then they took him away, told me to forget, to move on with my life like it never happened. Tears ran down her face again. But you can't forget something like that. You can't forget holding your child and knowing you'll never see him again. Why didn't you tell me? I asked gently. In 42 years. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was terrified, she said. Terrified you'd think less of me. Terrified you'd wonder what kind of mother gives away her child. What kind of wife keeps that secret? You thought I'd judge you? Wouldn't you? She asked, her voice raw. Even a little? I thought about that. I really thought about it. No, I said finally. I'd have been hurt if you didn't trust me, but I wouldn't have judged you for something that happened when you were 17. She covered her face again. I'm so sorry, Frank. I'm so sorry. I reached across the table, took her hand. She gripped it like a lifeline. I quit my job because I couldn't function, she said. Couldn't pretend everything was normal when my whole world was turning upside down. I found Robert through a support group. He helped me process everything, read David's letters with me, helped me figure out what to do. And what do you want to do? I asked. I don't know, she whispered. Part of me wants to meet him, to see what kind of man he became, to know he's okay. And the other part? I'm terrified, she said. Terrified of opening wounds that never fully healed. Terrified of what it means for us, for our family. The louder someone cries, the quieter your soul becomes. I sat there holding my wife's hand, feeling 42 years of marriage reshape themselves around this new truth. And I had no idea what came next. I couldn't stay in that house. After Linda went to bed, I grabbed my keys, drove with no destination, just needed the motion, the darkness, the space to think. The roads were empty at 1 a.m, streetlights and cornfields, the occasional gas station glowing like a beacon. I drove past the mill where I'd worked for 37 years, past the church where Linda and I got married, past the hospital where both our children were born. 42 years of shared history. Every street corner held a memory, but now there was a shadow over all of it, a question mark I couldn't erase. She'd lied to me, not once, not in a moment of panic, but deliberately, repeatedly, for months. I understood why, understood the fear and shame that had driven her silence, understood that she'd been protecting herself, protecting us, protecting the life we'd built. But understanding didn't erase the hurt. Every time she kissed my cheek and said she was working late, every time I'd sat alone wondering what I'd done wrong, every time I'd follow her car thinking I was about to lose everything, she'd let me suffer that, let me carry that weight alone. Was that fair? Was any of this fair? I pulled into the parking lot of the community center where she'd met Robert, sat there with the engine running, staring at the empty spaces, thought about trust, about how it's built slowly over decades, one promise kept at a time, one truth shared at a time, and how quickly it can fracture, not broken, not yet, but it cracked, weakened. I thought about David, about a man who'd lived his whole life without knowing his birth mother, who'd gone searching for answers, who'd reached out with letters Linda had been too afraid to share with me. He wasn't the enemy. He was a casualty of choices made before he could speak, just like I was a casualty of secrets kept long after I'd earned the right to hear them. But casualties heal, if you let them. I thought about Linda at 17, young, scared, alone, making an impossible choice under unbearable pressure. Then I thought about Linda at 68, still carrying that weight, still afraid, still believing she had to protect me from her past. Maybe she was right. Maybe I would have looked at her differently. Maybe knowing would have changed something between us. Or maybe it would have made us stronger, closer, more honest. I'd never know now. That choice had been taken from me, and that's what hurt most. Not the secret itself, but the fact that she'd decided alone, had carried it alone, had excluded me from something that should have been ours to face together. Love doesn't end with one secret, but trust can. And I didn't know yet if ours would survive this. I turned the truck around, drove home through the silent streets, wondering what came next. The house was dark when I got back. I walked inside quietly, saw a light still on in the bedroom, Linda sitting up in bed, waiting. She looked at me when I opened the door, eyes red, face exhausted. "I didn't know if you'd come back," she said. I sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't speak for a long moment. "I needed to think," I finally said. And I looked at her, really looked at her, saw the woman I'd married at 26, the woman who'd stood beside me through job losses and sick parents and raising children, the woman who'd shared 42 years of my life. And I also saw the 17-year-old girl who'd been sent away in shame, who'd held a baby for 10 minutes and spent the rest of her life wondering if she'd made the right choice. "I'm hurt," I said quietly. "You need to know that. You lied to me for months, and that's going to take time to work through." She nodded, fresh tears sliding down her cheeks. "But I also understand why you did it," I continued. "I don't agree with it, but I understand. Frank, I need time," I said. "I need space to process this, to figure out how I feel about all of it." "Okay," she whispered, "but I don't want to lose you." Her breath caught. 42 years is too long to throw away over secrets and fear," I said. "We've been through worse. We'll get through this too." "You mean that?" "I do." She reached for my hand. I let her take it. "I want to meet him," I said. She looked up, surprised. "What?" "David. Your son. I want to meet him." "Frank, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," I said, "because he's part of your story, and your story is part of mine now, whether I knew it before or not." She started crying again, but this time it was different, softer, almost relieved. "We do this together," I said. "No more secrets, no more hiding. If we're going to face this, we face it as a team. Together," she repeated. "On our terms," I added. "When we're ready. Not because he's pushing, not because you're scared, when both of us can handle it." She nodded, squeezed my hand. "I don't deserve you," she whispered. "Probably not," I said, and despite everything, a small smile touched my lips. "But you're stuck with me anyway." She laughed through her tears, pulled me close, held on like I might disappear. We sat there for a long time, just holding each other, not speaking, not needing to, because some wounds heal with words, and some heal with presence. A marriage isn't saved by perfection, it's saved by choosing to stay. And tonight, I chose to stay. 3 weeks later, we drove to Wisconsin. Linda had written back to David, told him the truth, that her husband now knew, that she wanted to meet him, that she needed time to prepare. He'd responded within 2 days, said he understood, said he'd wait as long as she needed. The restaurant was Linda's choice, neutral, ground, a small Italian place in Madison, halfway between our worlds. We arrived 15 minutes early, sat in the parking lot while Linda checked her makeup for the 3rd time. What if he's disappointed? She asked. He won't be. What if I say the wrong thing? You won't. She looked at me. What if this changes everything? I took her hand. It already has. Now we just see where it goes. We walked inside. The hostess led us to a booth in the back, and there he was, standing when we approached. Tall, dark hair going gray, Linda's eyes, a nervous smile that reminded me of our daughter. Linda? His voice shook slightly. David. She stopped a few feet away, like she was afraid to get closer, afraid it wasn't real. He moved first, stepped forward and gently embraced her. She broke, started crying against his shoulder. He held her carefully, like she might shatter. I stood back, gave them space, felt something tight in my chest, watching my wife hold the son she'd given up 43 years ago. When they finally pulled apart, David turned to me. You must be Frank. I extended my hand. He shook it firmly, man to man. Thank you for coming, he said. I know this isn't easy. Nothing worth doing ever is, I said. We sat, ordered coffee. The first few minutes were awkward, careful, like we were all walking on glass. David told us about his life, his adoptive parents, both gone now, his wife, Emily. His daughters were learning violin and soccer. Linda listened with hunger, absorbing every detail, every piece of the life she'd missed. They were good to me, David said. My parents, they loved me. I had a happy childhood. I'm glad, Linda whispered. That's all I ever wanted. But I always wondered, he continued, where I came from, who I looked like, why you chose what you chose. Linda's hands shook around her coffee cup. I didn't choose, she said quietly. I was 17, scared. My parents made the decision. I just went along with it. Do you regret it? He asked. She looked at him, really looked at him. I regret the circumstances, but not you. Never you. He nodded, swallowed hard, fighting his own emotions. I watched them find each other across 43 years of separation, watched something broken begin to mend, and I understood something I hadn't before. Love doesn't just live in the present. It echoes backward, forward, through generations, through choices made in fear and hope and desperation. When you meet your wife's son, you learn what love leaves behind. David visited Cedar Falls 3 weeks later, brought his wife and daughters, 2 bright girls who called Linda Miss Linda, and asked 1,000 questions about Iowa and corn and whether we had horses. Linda showed them the garden, the creek behind our property, the photo albums from when our own kids were young. I watched her with those girls. I saw something settle in her that I hadn't realized was missing. A lightness, a completeness. David and I talked on the back porch while the women made lemonade. This means everything to her, I said. To me too, he replied. I wasn't looking to replace anyone. My parents will always be my parents. But there was this hole, you know, this missing piece. I nodded. I understand. Do you? He looked at me. I mean, this can't be easy for you. Finding out your wife had a whole part of her life you didn't know about. It wasn't, I admitted. But marriage is long. People carry things. Sometimes you find out later than you'd like. Are you angry? I thought about that. I was. Now I'm just grateful she trusted me enough to let me in. He smiled. She talks about you constantly. Says you're the steadiest man she's ever known. She said that? In every letter. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through emails. Show me one. Frank is my anchor. Even when I was drowning, he didn't let me drift away. I stared at the words. I felt something loosen in my chest. David became a regular part of our lives after that. Not intrusive, not demanding, just a present. Phone calls on Sundays, photos of the girls, plans for holidays. Linda flourished. That's the only word for it. The distance that had built between us dissolved. The guardedness disappeared. She laughed more, reached for my hand more, looked at me like she had 30 years ago. One night, lying in bed, she turned to me. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up on me, for choosing to understand instead of walking away." "Where would I walk to?" I asked. "You're my home." She kissed me, soft, grateful, full of something that felt like relief. Our own children eventually met David. That was harder. They struggled with the idea that their mother had kept this secret for so long, but they came around, especially when they met his daughters. Family has a way of expanding when you let it. Christmas that year was different, louder, fuller. David and Emily and the girls joined us. So did Sarah and Michael and their families. I looked around the table at the faces, some I'd known forever, one I'd only just met, and realized something. Life doesn't always go the way you plan. Sometimes it breaks. Sometimes secrets spill out and reshape everything. But if you're lucky, it heals stronger than it was before. Sometimes family grows in the final chapters of your life, and sometimes that's exactly when you need it most. But it wasn't all easy. Some nights I'd wake up at 3 a.m, Linda sleeping beside me, and feel the weight of it again. The lies, the months of deception, the choice she'd made to carry everything alone. Trust isn't a switch you flip back on. It's rebuilt brick by brick, conversation by conversation. There were moments when I'd catch myself wondering what else I didn't know. If there were other secrets buried beneath the surface, other parts of her life I'd been locked out of, I'd push those thoughts away, remind myself that doubt is poison if you let it spread. But it was there, a shadow I couldn't quite shake. One evening, a few months after meeting David, Linda and I were doing dishes together. She was washing, I was drying. "You're quiet tonight," she said. "Just thinking." "About?" I set down the plate I was holding. "Do you ever wish you'd told me earlier, before David found you?" She stopped washing, turned off the water. "Look at me. Every single day," she said quietly. "I replay it constantly. All the moments I could have told you, should have told you. Why didn't you?" "Fear," she said simply. "I was afraid of losing you, afraid of changing how you saw me. And the longer I waited, the harder it got, until it felt impossible." "It was never impossible, Linda. I know that now." She dried her hands on a towel. "Frank, I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back those months of worrying. But I can promise you this. No more secrets. About anything. Ever." "How do I know that's true?" "You don't," she said. "You just have to trust me. And I have to earn that trust back. Every day. For however long it takes." I looked at her, saw the exhaustion in her face, the weight of what she'd carried, the genuine remorse. "I'm trying," I said, "to trust you again. But it's hard. I know. Some days are easier than others." "I know," she repeated. "And on the hard days, I'll be patient. I'll answer every question. I'll sit with you in doubt until it passes." She took my hand. "That's all I can offer. Transparency, time, and the promise that I'll never hide from you again." I nodded slowly. "That's enough, is it?" "It has to be," I said, "because the alternative is letting this destroy what we've built. And I'm not willing to do that." She pulled me close, rested her head against my chest. We stood there in the kitchen, surrounded by half-dried dishes and 42 years of shared life, learning how to trust each other again. It was slow work, painful sometimes, frustrating, but it was work worth doing, because trust isn't restored by time, it's restored by truth. And finally, we were telling each other the truth. I was 65 when this all started. I'm 67 now. I've worked 37 years in the same job, been married 43, raised 2 children, buried both my parents and all my wife's. I thought I understood life, thought I'd seen enough to know how things worked. Then Linda's secret came to light, and I realized I'd been wrong about almost everything. I learned that you can know someone for 4 decades and still not know all of them, that people carry weights you can't see, that shame doesn't care how much time has passed. It just keeps growing in the dark. I learned that love isn't about knowing everything. It's about choosing someone despite what you didn't know, about standing beside them when the truth finally surfaces, even when it hurts. I learned that trust is more fragile than I thought, but also more resilient, that it can crack without breaking, that it can be rebuilt if both people are willing to do the work. I learned that family isn't just what you're born into or what you create young. Sometimes it finds you late. Sometimes a man walks into your life at 71 and becomes part of your story in ways you never expected. David calls every Sunday now. His daughters send Linda drawings. They're planning to visit again this summer. And I'm grateful, not for the lies that brought us here, but for the truth that followed, for the healing that happened once the secret stopped festering in the dark. Linda and I are different now, more careful with each other, more deliberate, but also more honest. We talk about things we used to keep inside, small fears, old regrets, the parts of ourselves we thought the other couldn't handle. Turns out we can handle more than we thought. She still tears up sometimes when she looks at photos of David, still wrestles with guilt over the years she missed, but she's learning to forgive herself, to accept that she did what she could with the choices she had, and I'm learning to forgive her for not trusting me sooner, to understand that her silence was never about me. It was about a 17-year-old girl who was taught that her shame was something to bury and forget. Some nights we sit on the porch together, watching the sun set over the cornfields, not saying much, just being together, present. That's enough now. That presence, that choice to stay. At 65, I learned my biggest lesson. Even long marriages can have unopened doors, but opening them doesn't have to end everything. Sometimes it's just the beginning of understanding who you've been loving all along. Linda reaches for my hand as the last light fades. I take it, hold it gently. 43 years now, one unexpected son, countless moments of doubt and healing and choosing each other again. Not a perfect marriage, but ours. And that's exactly what it was always meant to be.